the purpose of this webinar, of course, is parts features. And in particular, we're going to be covering some new features that we recently added. These features are probably best described as they're going to have a pretty far reach. Actually, these features I'm going to be talking about are, you could consider them even to be like accounting features, because these are going to allow you to have a little bit more control over purchasing, in particular any kind of POs. We're going to be talking about how to enable those approvals on POs. So PO approvals are going to be an important thing we're going to talk about. GPOs, as general purchase orders, and parts purchase orders and vehicle purchase orders can all have approvals entered into the system. And what that means is that you can actually control in the dealership who has the ability to make purchases within certain dollar amounts. So that's a really cool feature. Maybe something that you might think of more as like an accounting control that can be turned on rather than like a parts thing. But it is a kind of a cool thing. We programmed it probably about a year ago. Not many people are using it, but what it does allows the dealership to take better control over purchases. And so that's one of the things we're going to be talking about here. Other thing we're going to be talking about is how to do those GPO templates. So a general purchase order has the ability to have a template. You know, what that means is when you're doing a general purchase, you don't have to type in the same things every single time. It makes it a little bit faster, especially if you do a lot of general purchases for your unit, something that you do every day, that you're entering in all these purchases. You can just pound them out very quickly by using templates. So here again, yeah, it is, we call it a parts feature. Maybe it's something that is better serviced by accounting. And actually, I'm looking at a few of the participants in the webinar today, and I can see that we've got a couple people that I recognize as being controllers or accounting controllers in the system. So that's probably fine that you guys are all going to be watching this stuff. All right. So first thing we'll talk about is the GPO, or general purchase order template. In parts and service, we can get there by going to 203 general purchase order. And this is also accessible from the accounting menu as well, going into tools, GPO and AR invoices. So what we are looking at is templates. So whenever you start a GPO, normally you have to put in your company up here at the top. We'll put in NTP as our company. And then we come down here, we usually have to type in some kind of a description, put in a cost. So this is where the template comes into play. If you click on the description, you'll see there's 3 dots here right next to the G button. The G button, of course, allows you to do a product search on Google Shopper. But the 3 dots allows you to load up a template. So this is going to bring you to the template search screen where you can go ahead and type in a category for the template. So an example of a category might be bus as a category, or purchase, or freight. Or you can just leave it blank and hit find and load up all of your templates, as I have just done. So these templates, basically, you're going to have a category, comments, description. We can filter it out by company number. We have different templates for different companies in the dealership. And then we also have your expense GL account, the quantity, and the cost, as well as a department and a profit center. So these columns, they actually do coincide with the different fields on the GPO. So if we go ahead and load up one of these, let's say AC, we hit select. And then we have another one here. We'll hit select. What I'm doing is I'm building a list of lines that are going to be added to this GPO down here in the bottom section. So what I can do is I can highlight those and remove them, and then go ahead and select a different one, hit select, and we can hit OK once we have everything set the way we want. So what has happened is the description, the comments, the quantity, the cost, the GL account, profit center, and department have all been filled out, and we get a separate line for each one of the templates. So as you can see, what a template actually is, a template is simply a line on a general purchase order. All right, so that takes care of that. It's just a faster way to create your general purchases. You know, and it's something that we've seen implemented across a couple of dealerships pretty successfully. People seem to really like it. And that's basically how that works. So before I move on to doing PO approvals and talking about that whole system, does anybody have any questions? Any questions about GPO templates? And if you do have any questions, you can actually raise your hand in the meeting. This webinar does allow you to raise your hand. You can also unmute yourself in the meeting. If you go in and hit unmute, you can go ahead and ask your questions. We only have, I think, 12 people in this webinar. So, you know, feel free to ask any questions. You won't be interrupting anything. And actually, you know what? So Andy has put in a chat here. Apparently you guys are, I guess Andy's having trouble hearing me. If you guys are having trouble hearing me, let me know. And I'll do my best. As far as I can tell, I think audio quality is working okay. I'll have to listen back to the recording to really know for sure. Okay, but I don't seem to have any questions regarding GPO templates. So once again, just pausing for any questions on GPO templates. Looks like somebody's using the Q&A system. Let's see here. So Jennifer does have a question about using GPOs for shop supplies and what would be the purpose of the preset in the case of using it for shop supplies. A preset would just make it a little bit faster. I mean, take some of the steps out. If you're doing a general purchase order for shop supplies, what you're probably doing right now is you're clicking add. Let's say we save this PO, we click add for a new. You put in the company that you're purchasing shop supplies from. See if I can find, no, they don't have anything in here. We'll do NTP. Let's just say NTP, we ordered some shop supplies. So what you're probably doing is going in here to description, putting in maybe shop, and then going over here to cost and typing in the amount of the shop supplies, $45 in this example. And that may be all you do. What we already have set up in the system is the ability to choose a default GL account. So it could be that NTP always defaults to your shop supplies expense account. If not, then you would also have to come in here and make sure that you search for your shop supplies GL account. You know, so what I'm saying is that there are kind of a lot of steps to this if you don't use a template. So here we have, this is just a policy account, not really shop supplies. But anyway, I'm having to basically do all this manually, putting in the cost. With a template, you know, you don't really have to do quite so much. All you would have to do is hit the 3 dots in here, hit find, you know, choose your shop supplies template, hit select, hit OK, and it will actually kind of fill out some of that for you. Maybe it fills out the description, it fills out the comments, it fills out the GL account. You probably will have to come in and choose the dollar amount to make that actually what you are spending for shop supplies. But I mean, the point is, you know, you're not having to fill out quite as much. You just basically are picking shop supplies as a template and then just filling out the dollar amount, and that's all you'd have to do. The GL account would be selected, the description and the comments would be selected for you. So maybe it could shave a couple of steps off of your process. All right, so I think we're pretty much good. All right, thanks, Jennifer. That was a good question. So hopefully that's a good example to show how that can save a little bit of time for general purchase orders. Yeah, let me know if you guys have any other questions on that. I'm happy to circle back to GPOs. Happy to circle back to this if you have any questions, but I am going to go ahead and move on to PO approval settings. What a PO approval is basically management at a dealership can determine one or two employees who have authorization to approve purchase orders. And that authorization can be granted based on a certain dollar amount. So what that means is all employees have authorization to purchase up to, let's say, $200. And then if you want to purchase something over $200, you now have to get approval from a certain employee at the company who has approval, like a manager, for example. So that's pretty cool. You know, we programmed this maybe a year or two ago. Not many people have used it. So what I'm going to do now is talk about how to set that up at your own dealership and show you what kind of options you can put in place for that. It's something that's very simple to set up, simple to maintain. So I'm just going to kind of walk through it. So what you'll do is go to Edit, Modify, Add Modify PO Approval Settings. All right, so, and this is in the Parts and Service module. Edit, Modify, Add Modify PO Approval Settings. And you can see that I already have a couple of these in here. When you actually log in, you're probably going to see an empty screen and you'll have to create them yourself. In other words, these don't come set up by default in the software. All right, so in order to create a new approval setting, you're going to see a little star character here. And actually, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and delete these two so that we can show you how it's going to look by default. You can choose whether you want to control parts purchases, general purchases, or unit purchases with these checkboxes. And then you can also make a rule for all suppliers, or you can choose an entity number for a certain supplier. You know, so like, for example, if I really only care about parts purchases to NTP, I would select PO and choose entity NTP, or I can search for entity numbers. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in the number of approvals. Let's say I want to have 2 separate managers approve every single purchase from NTP. Well, I would put the number of approvals would need to be 2, and then I can pick my dollar amount range. So in a good example would be, I don't, you know, maybe it's okay for my parts ordering people to order up to $500. You know, but I really don't want them making any big giant purchases. So what I would do is I'm requiring 2 approvals for any amount, $500, and I have to put a maximum. So I usually say, okay, up to $9 million. Just put a bunch of 9s in there as the maximum. So in this example, we want two separate approvals for any purchase over $500 to NTP. You know, and that's pretty specific. I mean, if you have a limit like this, you might actually want to take the entity out and just say, okay, for all suppliers in my parts department, you know, I want you guys to be able to make purchases up to $500. Anything over 500, you need a manager's approval. And actually, you're going to need 2 different managers to approve every single purchase. All right, so that's how that works. And then you actually do have to have a separate step here to set this up. There's a plus sign next to this. And under the plus sign, you have to choose which employees are authorized to make this purchase. So you can choose all if you want all employees to be able to approve themselves, but most likely you're going to want to choose the specific people. So like in this example, let's say Chris Huffer is a parts manager, he can approve it. Let's say Genevieve is the general manager at the store, so she can make approvals. And, you know, we have our service manager would be in this list if the service manager can make approvals over $500. And then finally, you can add the owner of the company, you know, to that list as well, that they can come in and make approvals. So I'm building a list of people who are authorized to approve on this particular rule. And again, because I have the number 2 up here, you know, there's going to have to be 2 people from this list who have to approve every single purchase over $500. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this rule and just kind of show how that would work. If I go in to a general purchase order and put in a company up here, NTP, put in a test, let's try to put in $600 as my general purchase. So if we hit order now, and say, are you sure you're ready to place this order? Actually, that one just went ahead and placed it, didn't it? Oh, because this is a general purchase order. My mistake. Look, I've totally messed up my example here. So if I go back to my PO approval settings, GPOs are not included in this rule. Only parts purchases are. So I would actually have to check off GPO if I wanted this rule to apply to GPOs. I'm going to go ahead and apply it to GPOs and POs and unit purchase orders too. All right. All right, we'll run through this example again. NTP is my supplier. Test description, $600. If I hit order now, it says this PO cannot be ordered until all approvals are completed. All right, so this is, if I go back to my approvals tab down here, there's actually an approvals button on every PO. And at this point, you can see that I have to have 2 employees approving this. And if I click approve, it says you do not have permission to approve this PO. So in other words, my employee user has to be in that list of approved employees if I'm going to be able to approve this. So only, I don't know who I picked, I think it was Chris Huffer and like 3 other employees. 2 of those people have to come in, and I have to have both of these approvals filled out before I can order the PO. So what that means is, you know, the dealership has that control over this. So that approvals button at the bottom of a general purchase order, that's also going to be at parts purchase orders as well. So if I open up a parts PO, we actually have an approvals button at the bottom of this one as well. And as you can see, we have to have 2 approvals because of the rule. This is a $16,000 parts PO, so we have to have both of those approved. We also have an unapproved button. So that's kind of, I find that kind of comical, but you can actually approve this. And then if later on you want to remove an approval, you can click unapprove and basically rescind that. All right, I think that pretty much covers how approvals work. You know, it's just basically we're looking into any time a purchase order is created in the system, we're going to require approvals based on these rules. So feel free to take a look at it, edit, modify, PO approval settings. The other thing we talked about today was add modified GPO template items. All right, so any questions on any of this? I'm going to go ahead and look. We do have some people using our question system. So gotcha. It looks like we had some questions about UPO. Yeah, UFO would have been a little bit strange. So Andy is asking, how do you get the approvals? So an approval, basically what you would have to do as a manager is look at your purchase order list, and anything that is not ordered, more than likely it's going to be in a need approval status. So that need approval status is what we've renamed our not ordered status. So what you would do as a manager is anything that's in that status, you'd have to come in, check over it, and then click the approval button on this PO. Now in this case, it's below the dollar limit, so no approvals are required. So this is something that a regular employee could order. So what this means is the manager doesn't actually have to place every single order. The manager just has to look at this list and open up all the POs that are set to need approval. So at a certain point in the day, you just run through, approve all the POs that you need to, and then later on, your parts ordering personnel can actually go in and place those orders because they've been approved. So everyone who is on the approved list needs to sign on to their systems to approve the orders. Yes, that's an important thing to talk about. So our system is actually looking at who is signed into the system. So right now, at the bottom, it says I'm signed in as myself. Unless my name is on the list on the approval setting, I am not going to be able to do any approvals. So for example, as a manager, if you go to somebody else's workstation, you might have had this from time to time, you'll be unable to approve things from somebody else's computer. You're going to have to log in under your own account in order to do approvals. All right, so those are some good questions. I know it's kind of an odd thing to wrap your head around when you've seen it for the first time. I know I kind of had to look at this and play with it before I really understood how it worked. But yeah, that's hopefully we've given you a good kind of overview, edit, modify, PO approval settings. And then the thing that trips me up a couple times is after I'd created a few settings in here, I forgot to hit the plus sign next to them and actually add employees. I thought that, okay, it may have been a security setting that maybe you're allowed in security to approve POs, but that's not how it works. You actually have to choose the employee in this list. It's not a security setting of being allowed to approve all POs. It's more like each one of these rules has its own list of employees who are approved at each stage. So I'm going to take this one step further and kind of show you what a common setup might be. Because we have the maximum amount, I could say everything from $500 to $2,000, I can have these managers make approvals. Now I can create a second rule for all POs types and all suppliers where I say we're going to need 2 approvals on anything that's, 2,001 penny up to my 9 million maximum. And like everything over $2,000 has to be approved by a certain person, like a top level manager. All right, so what that means is anybody can approve, as a certain list of people, anyone can approve things up to $500. Any employee can do that. 5,000 to 2,000, we have a list of 4 people who can add that approval. And then anything over 2,000, there's a single person who can approve that. So this is actually kind of a common setup. You can set up these tiers where once you pass a certain price point, you have to get an approval from a certain person. All right, so I'm going to hit save on that. So hopefully that kind of shows how this works. When you go in to check this out on your own, it's going to look like this, where you just see the minimums and the maximums. So just be aware that you're going to have to hit that plus sign on the left and actually pick your list of employees who can make the approval. Other than that, there might be some security settings still that you'll have to look at before you can set this up on your own. In particular, only certain employees can actually get into this screen. When you go to Edit, Modify, Add Modified PO Approval Settings, you have to have permission to do this. So if you go on your system and try to do this, you don't have permission, it's a security setting, so just go ahead and fix it in security on your own if you have permission to do that, or you know, go ahead and put in a note or notify management that you need permission to set that up. Okay, any last questions anybody has regarding the stuff we talked about today? Yep, so Manuel is asking about the status again. So these need approval statuses. Right now in your system, it probably just says not ordered. So the point is, once I have my approvals and I click that order button at the bottom, order now, it's actually going to change status to ordered. So let me go ahead and run through that example. Yeah, so you see how it changes to the ordered, that purple status? That's going to happen automatically once an order successfully goes through. So that's how it falls off the need approval status. So that's always just going to happen in the system. That's not something new. It will change the status for you automatically once you've ordered it. To do that, if you go to Edit, Modify Statuses, you can actually go into your PO statuses and make the changes. So in this case, we've actually added a needs approval status. Internally, it is a not ordered status. So anytime you have something not ordered, it's going to go into the needs approval, unless you manually change it to not ordered. You know, so at this point, you can say, if you don't need a manager to look at it, you could just change your open PO to not ordered, and then maybe later on, you can go ahead and order that. That's what that gives you the power to do. All right, that's a good question. Any other questions on the PO approvals or anything else we talked about? PO approvals or GPO templates? All right, sounds good. Yeah, I'd say feel free to check it out in your live system. These are features that we programmed, I want to say about a year ago, and we had some technical issues at first, you know, but now we've got it sorted out to where if you try it on your live system, you're most likely going to have a very stable working process for those approvals. So, yep, feel free to give it a try if you have any trouble. Go ahead and send an email to our support department for any kind of questions or problems that you might have. Again, the support department can do software updates if you're having trouble with this process. Maybe it's an old version that had a technical issue. They can get it updated for you. Or if you have a request for permission, if you can't edit this setting for you, whether it's the setting for GPO templates or the setting for PO approvals, these are both controlled by security permissions, and our support department can make the change for an authorized party at the dealership. So feel free to shoot an email to support@motilitysoftware.com with any questions. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you for your attentiveness. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, shoot them over to support@motilitysoftware.com. Thanks, guys.